on page 17, the report notes that there is a 40% vacancy rate as a result of the new organizational structure. I just want to check, as much as we applaud the department in appointing the engineers and the scientists within the department, but I just want to check if there's any time frame to fill the new vacancies, and what could be the financial impact of this new organizational structure going forward. On page 35, it is reported that the department has overspent on the compensation of employees and that it would address the shortfall through budget reprioritization. Which of the areas are going to be affected by this budget reprioritization, and what would be the impact of that on the provision of water and sanitation services to our communities? The other question, Chair, we note that the department has gazetted the notice to reconfigure the water boards. Has the department conducted public participation in affected communities to ensure that communities are not left behind? The last question, Chair, I think I'm not quite sure which slide is it appearing on. The MoneyWeb News Agency reported that Rubex Pty Ltd, I think it's appearing in one of your slides, is challenging the tender award for Glen Williams STEM project in court, alleging that the tender has been awarded to the company that quoted the highest amount. Without venturing into the merits of the case, is the department defending the case, and what will be the effect of this court case on the said project, the Glen William Dam project? Thank you, Chair.
The 10-year-old Honorable Mushala.
No, thank you so much, Chairperson. Let me take the opportunity and greet members of the Portfolio Committee and the department. It's been a long period not seeing each other, but I hope we're going to share what we found on the ground because we're busy doing oversight. Honorable Mashego, the infrastructures are collapsing outside there. We'll share when time goes on what is happening outside. But my first question with regards to the presentation is how many members compromise the Regulator Commission? Why a separate commission if there are already internal systems in place to assist with strengthening and improvement of the regulatory function? Chair, the second question is, could the department provide details of the challenges and responses of communities of water boards in specific area? Can we also have a fuller report in terms of the reconfiguration of water boards in respect of modalities used, the budgets, and community concerns raised during this process? Chairperson Nedlek previously raised concerns on the establishment of the National Water Infrastructure Agency. How were these addressed, and what is the current view of Nedlek in establishing the agency? Chair, another question is, what is the current practice of coordinating infrastructure in the country? And how will the established agency fit into the broader framework of infrastructure development in South Africa? Lastly, Chair, with the recent BRICS meeting, was the minister involved in bilateral and multilateral discussions with the BRICS counterparts on funding for water and sanitation infrastructure? Thank you so much, Chair.
Honorable Hendricks.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. Yes, Honorable Chair, we have been working the ground, and Al-Jamaa has been shocked to find that wherever we went, and we nearly visited, made contact with 50 villages, there are serious problems in complying with the constitutional court order that people must, constitutional provision that people must have access to water. You know, Honorable Chair, my position that must be changed. People must have a right to water. And it looks like the state of affairs as far as providing water is concerned is not very, very rosy. You know, Chair, I accompanied you with regard to the bucket toilets. President Mandela promised that within 1 year, everything would be solved. That hasn't happened. So I'm very worried that our department, in our oversight role, maybe we've not been on the ball, and I also take responsibility for that. We are letting the nation down. We also hear now about the cholera outbreak and the many deaths that have occurred in more than one province. As an interim measure, Honorable Chair, I feel that while the minister has suggested that people boil their water, you can't boil the water if you don't have electricity. Aren't there any other ways that we can assist communities to mitigate the effect of water coming, for example, out of the taps, even if the tap is only in the backyard, there's a communal tap, water coming from tankers. There are many sanitizing products available. And shouldn't we start asking the department to investigate, number one, is there a need as an interim measure to sanitize water? You get this powder which looks like an Enos packet. You throw it into a bucket, and 20 liters of water is as good as the water you buy in the shop, which is very expensive. And this method, it's about 1 rand a liter in cost. Shouldn't we ask the department to look at whether there is a need to sanitize water in let's call it hotspots? And secondly, what is available? Thirdly, can't we then ask municipalities to look in their budgets to assist, and also the minister to, when we do the adjustment budgets, to assist? Because it's my Alzheimer's view that besides just boiling the water, there should also be other remedies available. Thank you very much, Honorable Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Hendricks. Just one or two questions or comments I want to make, DG and Honorable Mahlobo. On the preferential chart, I take note that on the, I'm not sure whether you are not achieving your targets solely on the basis of the absence of the companies that are owned by both women, youth, and people with disability. If so, don't you want to have a different approach, because it reflects bad on yourself to commit money, and that in that money you have got nobody to spend unto. If that is the case, I'm not saying it is the case. For instance, on women, it's not necessarily bad, but it is still an underperformance. You have performed 61%. You have a target. You have achieved 61% of that particular preferential target, and that is and that was 30%. You have achieved 61% of 30%. It's not necessarily 61% of 100. It's 100 is 30, and we only achieved 61. The amount of money is 760 million rand. So you have achieved more than 400 million rand, I assume. Is it bad? If it is not bad, why do we put a bigger figure when we know there is no company to spend on this money? This money could have been given to other targets where you can achieve. For instance, on the youth also, you have achieved 32% of 15. On money terms, it is the 15 is 129 million. So you have achieved 32% of 129 million. Why? If ever it is because you don't get companies of the youth, don't you want to change the strategy of allocating the money and allocate money on the basis of the need rather than on the basis of a commitment, even if the need is not there? People with disability also, we have achieved about 19% of the 15, and it is 19% of 27 million rand. These monies that are not being achieved, if it is because you have got no company to spend onto, don't you want to deviate it or to reallocate to readily spending targets that you can give money unto if there is any, and it is on the basis of me assuming that you have not achieved because of the non-availability of the companies you want to give to. On the dam safety, you are saying you have achieved only 9 of the 25. And the reason there is because of poor performance by contractors. But there is no plan that want to beef up the output of that contractor to get to meet the target of that 25%. If I have missed it, please make me aware. Where is that plan that needs to change that status quo from 9 to 25? In the bulk supply, the same. We are very behind on the. And this is our mandate. Bulk supply of water is our mandate, but we are behind in terms of that particular plan, behind by 186 million rand, and there is no plan that I have heard you saying you are going to do in order for us to achieve those. I might have missed at that point. Just taking further what Honorable Zek was raising on the employees' compensation. You are already overspending on the money that you have, whilst you are saying there is 541 positions that are not being filled, but you have already underspent it on your budget of the money. Now, if you are going to be filling those 541, we must appreciate you have filled about 60-70% of a position, especially on engineering side. That's a very good job to be done, but it's still, there are still 541 positions on your human resource department, which is not being filled. However, you have already spent way beyond the budget that you had for 100%, when 541 of them are still outstanding. How is that? What is the reason for that? Finally, you just as an English, it's only for English purposes. On the transfers, you're saying that you are going to be transferring on the 27th of July. We are on August now. You are supposed to be saying you have transferred rather than you are going to be transferring on the 7th of July, and the other one is on the 4th of August. And today on the 29th of August, it might be that the report was written before the 27th of July. If that is the case, you need to upgrade your report given the status that you are now in August, rather than you still being saying it in the incoming tax when it pays, when it is actually on the past tense. But as I'm saying, it is only English. You might correct it simply to mean the correct thing. Thank you very much. We might want to get answers. Honorable Mahlobo, if you want to start, you can start. If you want to end, you might end. And we allow DG Phillips to start if that is the case. Honorable Mahlobo, are you in the meeting?
Let's allow the DG to respond. I'll
Okay.
come at the end. Thank you.
DG Phillips.
Thank you, Chairperson and honourable members. I'm going to give responses to some of the questions and issues raised. and then I'm going to direct my colleagues to respond to others. The first question that I'd like to respond to is the question from Honourable Peterson, just to explain the reforms that we are planning to do through the amendments of the Water Services Act. Currently, the Water Services Act doesn't give us a stronger role as a regulator as the National Water Act does for water resources. The National Water Act gives us regulatory powers, including issuing directives, and if necessary, as a last resort, to lay criminal charges against transgressors of the Act, and also to, in some instances, to rectify transgressions and then to claim the money back. So the first key area that we want to amend the Water Services Act is to make it more similar to the National Water Act, to strengthen the regulatory powers of DWS and the Minister over water services, to give us similar regulatory powers that we have over water resources. The second, and this partly answers the question raised by Honourable Hendricks as to what we're planning to do about the declining performance of municipalities with regard to water services. I'm going to come back to that question a bit later, but one of the reasons for amending the Water Services Act, as I indicated, is to strengthen our role as the regulator with regard to water services. And as part of that, we want to actually build on the existing provisions in the Act, which indicate that at municipal level, you're supposed to have water services authorities on the one hand and water service providers on the other hand. And in terms of the existing Act, the role of the Water Service Authority is to ensure that water service providers provide services according to standard. But unfortunately, almost all municipalities are not playing their roles properly as water services authorities, those municipalities which have been appointed by the Minister of Cooperative Governance as water services authorities. So we want to strengthen the role of water services authorities in terms of them ensuring that water service providers provide services to standard. The current situation is that in almost all municipalities, the Water Services Authority has only appointed the municipality itself as the sole water service provider. And so as Water Services Authority, the municipality has to monitor itself as water service provider. But in terms of the existing Act, municipalities are supposed to separate and manage separately their functions of Water Services Authority and water service provider, but hardly any are doing that. So to strengthen those existing provisions of the Act and to provide water services authorities with an objective, evidence-based way of assessing whether their water service providers are providing services to standard, we want to introduce an operating license system for water service providers, which will, so that all water service providers must obtain an operating license from DWS, which will be an objective way of determining whether they have the capacity and capability to provide water services according to standards. Then we want to also amend Section 63 of the Water Services Act, which as it's currently written is not practical to implement. Section 63 of the Act enables the Minister as a last resort to intervene in the municipality, but that intervention is in line with the constitutional interventions, where you also need to do it in conjunction with COGTA and the Premier of the province, and to take over the water delivery function in the municipality. But it's not clear in the current provisions of the Act as to what that means to take over the water function in the municipality. It's not clear whether it also includes taking over the billing and revenue collection for water and the supply chain and HR functions, which are in almost all municipalities, not in the water and sanitation department, but in other parts of the municipality. So we want to improve Section 63 so that as a last resort, the Minister can appoint a licensed water service provider on behalf of the municipality, and when that happens, that will include all the water service related functions, including billing and revenue collection, so that the water service provider can be financed, because otherwise there's no financial mechanism for the water service provider, and all the other functions such as supply chain, etc. So that, and then there are also some minor amendments we want to make to the Water Services Act just to strengthen the governance of the water boards. We don't expect for Parliament to process the amendments to the Water Services Act and the National Water Act during this term of office. We're aware that that would be unreasonable. We've been doing a lot of hard work on these amendments to the Water Services Act. As you can hear from the description that I've given, it's quite a complicated matter, and we've had extensive consultations about it, and we didn't want to rush those. So that's why it's taken us some time to develop these amendments to the Water Services Act. We're aware that with Parliament's schedule, it might only be possible for the Water Services Act and the National Water Act amendments to be finalised by Parliament in the new term. With regard to the reconfiguration of the water boards, there aren't really any substantial obstacles to implementing the reconfiguration. The reconfiguration is proceeding quite smoothly. Our bigger worry with regard to the water boards is the issue of their financial sustainability, particularly with regard to what's now called the Rand Central Water Board, which was previously Bloem Water, which has taken over, the Vaal Central Water Board, which has taken over the assets and liabilities of the former Sedibeng Water, which includes debt of over 5 billion Rand from Matjhabeng Municipality and also debts from Mangaung Municipality. So we're very concerned that with the non-payment of debts by municipalities to the Vaal Central Water Board in particular, that is negatively affecting the financial sustainability of that water board. It's already put the water board in a position where it's no longer able to borrow money due to the impact on its balance sheet of taking over the liabilities of the former Sedibeng Water. So this issue of the increasing debt from municipalities to water boards is an issue which is really a separate issue from the reconfiguration of the water boards. The reconfiguration of the water boards doesn't address this problem of non-payment by some municipalities of their bills to the water boards. And it's an issue which we're dealing with through a separate process in consultation with National Treasury and SALGA and the water boards themselves. We've developed standard operating procedures for the water boards and our own water trading entity for credit control, so that we can have more effective and stronger credit control over these debts owed by municipalities. And there are also other measures that we've consulted with National Treasury about, which would include, for example, collaborating with National Treasury for the equitable share to municipalities to be withheld if they don't pay their debts to the water boards. The Minister is currently consulting with the water boards to finalise these credit control measures to address this issue. Turning to the questions from Honourable Seki. Honourable Seki, we have a new structure which was approved by the Minister, and it was a very involved process to develop this new structure, and took a great deal of consultation internally in order to finalise the structure. So we don't want to change our structure frequently because it's a disruptive process. It's a very involved process and it takes a long time. So we thought that the best thing to do when we developed the new structure is to develop a structure which should meet our needs into the medium and long term. But the structure is not fully fundable now with the limited personnel budget that we've been allocated by National Treasury. We're not the only department in this situation, and the DPSA has advised us and all the other departments to capture the funded structure on personnel, which is what we've done. And then as and when more funds become available through our personnel budget in future, we can add additional to personnel and start filling them. At the moment, we are not in a position to fill many vacancies at all. As the honourable members pointed out, we're already using 100% of our personnel budget. So there's very little room to fill any vacancies. The only possibility is if posts are vacated through natural attrition or through resignations or retirements. And in that case, we don't automatically fill those posts, but we look at what are the most burning priorities in the department, and then we prioritize allocation of any personnel budget which is freed up to filling the most burning priorities. So unfortunately, although we'd love to fill those engineering and technical positions, we simply don't have the budget to do so. And it's not as a result of us not asking for the necessary budgets, but honourable members will be aware that Cabinet has approved policies and processes to reduce the personnel budget as a percentage of the total budget. So all departments have been provided with what is effectively budget cuts in real terms for their personnel budgets. In terms of the question about budget reprioritization, I'll ask Frans to add to that in more detail, but we have, at a high level, you can think of it as that we have two types of budget reprioritization. There's budget reprioritization within our internal administrative corporate services types of budgets. So for example, we're going to make sure that we don't overspend on personnel expenditure by the end of the year by moving money from other corporate services internal administrative budgets to address that. Not from our budgets for actual projects or services. So we're not going to take, for example, from the regional bulk infrastructure grant and use that money to fund over expenditure on personnel. When we do budget reprioritization between projects of our project budgets, we don't stop the projects that we were reprioritizing money for. Those are projects that we're reprioritizing money from. Those are projects which, for various reasons, are moving slower than expected, and it looks like they're going to underspend in the current financial year. So to avoid overall under-expenditure on our budget, we move that money to other projects which can absorb the money, which are moving quicker than expected. And then we don't stop the projects or reduce those projects. We just make money available in the following financial year for those projects so that they can be completed. So this budget reprioritization doesn't have any real impact on the ground in terms of projects delivered to communities. So it's not necessary to consult with communities about them because it doesn't make any change to the actual water services projects being delivered to communities. It's a matter of us managing our expenditure in such a way that we don't have under expenditure in a particular financial year, because some projects have had some kind of difficulties like labor disputes or disruptions from business organizations or many other reasons. And we therefore actively manage the budgets for projects so that projects that are able to move faster use the money, which have had problems can't use this financial year, but we do still provide the necessary funds to finish those other projects. Turning to the questions from Honourable Mohlala, The reason why we created the Regulator Commission is that in the National Development Plan, it says there should be an independent regulator for water. And the reason for that is that there's an argument that the department is conflicted because it is both implementer and regulator. So we are currently the regulator of the water resources sector in terms of the National Water Act, and we're also the regulator of the water services sector at municipal level in terms of the Water Services Act. But we also provide grants to municipalities, and in that sense, we're an implementer. And for water resources, we own and manage the water resource infrastructure. So we're both the regulator and the implementer for national water resources. And there are some arguments to the effect that it's not good governance to have to be both regulator and implementer, that there should be a separation. So for that reason, the National Development Plan had a recommendation that an independent water regulator should be established, just as there's an independent regulator for electricity and there's an independent regulator for telecommunications. However, our minister has taken the view that it's premature at this stage to establish a fully independent regulator for the water sector. He's taken the view that it's better to strengthen the regulation function within the department first before before moving it out of the department and creating an independent regulator. And as I indicated earlier, the amendments that we are proposing for the National Water Act and to the Water Services Act are part of this process of strengthening regulation. The minister has indicated that he's not opposed in the longer term to the creation of an independent regulator, but that it's premature to do so currently. But in order to address the concern that the department is conflicted because it is both regulator and implementer, the minister took a decision to in the interim, create an advisory body made up of independent experts, which is the Regulator Commission, so that we can mitigate this risk associated with us being both implementer and regulator in the short to medium term, through having an independent advisory body made up of experts, which can provide the minister and the department with independent advice with regard to how it can strengthen and improve its regulatory function. So it's not doing the job of the department, it's an advisory committee. The department's regulatory branch continues to do all the work that it's always done. Honourable Mokala suggested that it would be beneficial for the department to provide a full report on the reconfiguration of the water boards. Chairperson, we can be available on request a future meeting to provide such a full report. Honourable Mokala also asked about NEDLAC and the National Water Resource Infrastructure Agency bill. We did go through a process with NEDLAC. We took the bill to NEDLAC. There were discussions at NEDLAC, and then NEDLAC, in terms of their normal processes, decided to create a NEDLAC task team to deal with the bill, consisting of representatives of organised business, organised labour, and the community. That task team had a number of meetings where it assessed the bill in detail. That task team has reached the end of its work. We recently received a final report from NEDLAC on the work of the NEDLAC task team. So as far as NEDLAC is concerned, they've completed the consultation process for the bill. The report indicates that there were some areas of agreement on the bill and some areas of disagreement. And the key area of disagreement was from organised labour, which indicated that generally it's not in support of the creation of independent entities, and that it would prefer for all the functions to remain within departments. But the decision of NEDLAC was to note that as an area of disagreement, and it still finalised the report. Honourable Mohlala also asked how the NWRA will fit into the broader governance framework. Honourable Mohlala, one way to think of this, using a practical example, is to think of the NWRA as a bit like a SUNRAL, but for the water sector, where SUNRAL was created in the transport sector to own and manage the national road network, and to get revenues from the national road network, and to use that money for further investment in the national road network, and to use its balance sheet to borrow money for investment in the national road network. And I think SUNRAL has been relatively successful as a state-owned enterprise, as a model where you have an entity responsible for a certain national function, and where it has a substantial balance sheet with revenues, and it uses that to raise finance to increase investment. So we want to do exactly the same thing as the NWRA. Its mandate is to continue with the current mandate of the department in terms of the National Water Act, of our infrastructure branch, to own and manage and develop national water resource infrastructure. The thing that will change is that the TCTA will be merged into the NWRA, as will our water trading entity in the department, so that you'll now have those two entities merged into one entity, together with our most of our staff from our infrastructure branch of the department. And that entity will then be fully responsible for owning, managing, maintaining, and developing and financing the development of the national water resource infrastructure. And that means that it will be able to raise more finance on the markets for more investment in national water resource infrastructure. Currently, the TCTA is limited in the extent to which it can borrow money to invest in national water resource infrastructure. It's reached its borrowing limits because it doesn't have a substantial balance sheet, because it doesn't have revenues of its own. It has to have its loans guaranteed by National Treasury. But now, when we have the NWRA, it will have a substantial balance sheet, it will have its own revenues, and it will be in a better position to raise private sector finance for investment in water resource infrastructure. So the overall most important goal with this is to increase investment in national water resource infrastructure. And the fiscus is constrained in the degree to which it can finance this. We all know the constraints on the fiscus, and it's going to be very difficult for government from the fiscus alone to provide the amount of money required to do the investments in national water resource infrastructure which are required over the medium to long term, if we're going to avoid having water shortages in the country and water becoming a constraint to economic growth, like electricity is currently a constraint to economic growth. So that's basically where the NWRA fits into the broader government framework. There was also a question as to whether the Minister had discussions at BRICS about financing for water. The Minister did participate in some sessions at BRICS, but there weren't specific discussions around financing for South African water projects at BRICS. It wouldn't have been the appropriate forum for that. The TCTA does engage with financiers such as the BRICS Bank and the New Development Bank with regard to raising finance for water projects. And there's a separate process through the TCTA for that. And once the TCTA is merged into the NWRA, then the NWRA will carry out those engagements. Turning to the questions from Honourable Hendricks. Honourable Hendricks, we agree with you that there's an alarming decline in the performance of water services by municipalities on average. And our Green Drop report, which we issued last year, highlighted that decline in the performance of wastewater treatment systems. Our Blue Drop report Watch report, which we issued in June, also indicated a decline in the quality of drinking water systems, and our full blue drop report is going to also verify that finding, that there's been a decline in the quality of drinking water systems. There are 2 or 3 key things that we're doing as the department to address this. The first is, as honourable members will know, that the Minister and Deputy Ministers are constantly travelling around the country, going to the poorly performing municipalities, meeting with the leadership, agreeing with the leadership of the municipality on an action plan to address the problems. We prioritise our grant allocations to those municipalities to address the infrastructure-related issues. But it's not only infrastructure-related issues. Often there are soft issues as well, which are the key cause of the problem. Our Blue Drop report, for example, shows that management issues and municipalities not hiring staff with the right qualifications, the correct qualified process controllers, not prioritizing maintenance, not appointing skilled managers to manage their wastewater treatment works and water treatment works. Those kind of issues are often as important, if not more important, than infrastructural issues as causes of deficiencies in water services. Then the second thing that we're doing is that we are strengthening our regulatory function within the department. We are standardizing our regulatory actions across all of our regional offices so that we become more consistent with our regulatory actions. So in the past, we've been lacking in consistency, for example, where a municipality is polluting the environment through sewage spillages. We haven't always been consistent in terms of our regulatory actions against such a municipality. So we are in the process of addressing that by ensuring that we become much more consistent and that we have better controls over our regulatory processes. We are also strengthening our regulatory function through other measures, such as, for example, developing improved and more comprehensive minimum norms and standards for water and sanitation services, which will include, for example, adding additional minimum requirements for new categories of employees at municipalities, such as the managers of wastewater treatment works and water treatment works, and not just the process controllers. And then finally, Honourable Hendricks, the amendments to the Water Services Act that I mentioned are aimed at addressing this problem in a very fundamental way by introducing this operating license system for water service providers and the ability of the Minister, as a last resort, to appoint a licensed water service provider or Water Services Authority where the Water Services Authority repeatedly fails to do so. Your question, Chairperson, about the reasons for not achieving the preferential procurement targets. Chairperson, we don't set aside money for certain groups to get projects. We're not allowed to do that in terms of the law. In terms of the law, all of our procurements have to follow the same process. They all have to go out on open tender where anyone can put in a bid. We're not allowed to have set aside for certain groups. So we have to put it on open tender where anyone can bid for the procurements. And then we have to, and when we advertise the tender, we have to say that of 100 points, so many points are allocated for different types of preferences, e.g. for black ownership, or for BE score, or for woman ownership, for example. And we only allowed, in terms of the law, for smaller tenders to allocate 20% of the points to preferences, and for larger tenders to allocate 10% of the points to preferences. And then we have to, and all the remainder of the points, the 80% and the 90% of the points, have to be allocated on the basis of price. So, and then we have to apply those rules when we adjudicate the tenders through our bid committees. The bid committees have to ensure that we apply those rules meticulously. And then we have to award the highest point scoring tenderer. So in the instances where a supplier tenders a very competitive price, the supplier doesn't get much points for preferences, but but tenders a very competitive price, that supplier might come out with the highest points, and we have to award by law to that supplier because they got the highest points. So we don't really have, within the legal framework as it is, we don't really have power to choose which tenders get awarded to which bidders on the basis of preference. We have to just apply the formula, and then we have to award to the highest scoring tenderers. And we don't know what is going to come out until the formula is applied, the calculations are done, and the tender is awarded. Now, the targets that we have, are also not set by us. These are generic targets which are provided to us by the presidency that we have to include in our APP because the government is trying to move towards achieving these targets for the government as a whole. So they've asked all the departments to put in place these targets. So we within the legal framework as it is, we've gone as far as we can, and we got in terms of allocating the preference points. And we always allocate either 20% or 10% of the total points to these preferences. But beyond that, it has to be awarded to the highest point scoring bidder. And that is the main reason why we don't achieve the targets, because we can't do anything more than we're doing in terms of the law. And if we don't apply those things to the letter and very meticulously, we get audit queries and it gets classified as irregular expenditure. Frans, can I hand over to you to add and to answer some of the questions, please?
Thank you, DG. Chairperson, I'll start with the question around the environments. The honourable member is correct that we are shifting funds from the former Umgeni water. Those are the allocations that have been appropriated for specific projects that are under the ownership of the water board. So that is correct. So we have applied also due diligence to make sure that we understand the status of those projects, where they are, also the reserves that they are having. Then in contrast, the other slide that the member was referring to, those prioritizations are within the water services infrastructure grant to municipalities. Perhaps the narrative wasn't clear. So one is to the water board, the prioritization, and the other one is on the grants for, it was also through the Mhlatuzi water board, the former Mhlatuzi water board. And on the invoices, I can also confirm to the honorable member that we have paid those invoices immediately at the beginning of the new financial year. The DG approved that we could utilize the current year's budget whilst awaiting approval from National Treasury. So those were promptly paid, but we needed to also deal with the issue of the budget. And then the impact, DG touched on that, on the compensation of employees, but just to add is that we are focusing more on cost containment items, as yes indicated, rather than on projects, changing the way we do business, the use of consultants, where possible, that we are minimizing those. We are managing very closely our travel and subsistence area, sponsorships, events, and catering conferences that officials will be attending. Those are the cost containment items that we are currently, or we have prioritized the funding from, whilst awaiting also the midterm budget adjustment through National Treasury. That related to the questions from Honorable Second. And I think the other question was a comment from the chairperson. We will certainly, going forward, where we have reference to future dates, we will try as much as it can be relevant to provide the status quo. I'm referring now to the issue around the July, the transfers that were scheduled in the second quarter. So we have taken note of that, and to the extent that is possible, we will reflect on those current status. I'm not sure, DG, there's any specific matter that...
Yes, please, Frans. The issue that raised by Honourable Moore about the reprioritization away from Umgeni and then the apparent reprioritization back to Umgeni.
Yes, that is the earlier one. The Reprioritization from Umgeni, as indicated earlier on, is from the projects that are owned by the Water Board for the funding that has been earmarked for Umgeni Water. And where we are reprioritizing back to Umgeni, it's because of that measure, DG, of the two water boards. Initially, it was Mhlathuze Water, actually. The funds were allocated to Mhlathuze Water. So it's just now that they are one. So that is the reason why there is an in and out.
And then there was also a question from Honourable Teki about the service, whether the service providers have been paid.
Yes, we have indeed paid that relates to those system errors. So we have immediately paid those invoices in the month of April. We have approved those. So we don't have those as outstanding invoices.
Okay, thank you. Info, can you answer the question about the court case?
Thank you very much, DG, Chairperson, DM. The question was whether the department is defending the litigation. The answer to that is that the parties have embarked into a settlement negotiation, and then they've actually reached an outcome that seems to be favorable between them. The terms and conditions of that settlement or outcome are to be confirmed by the Western Cape High Court today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Info. And Leonardo, there were some questions for you.
Thank you, DG. Honorable Chair, honorable members, DM. The question that was asked by the Honorable Chair regarding the 9% versus the 25% as far as the dam safety project is concerned at Bloemhof Dam. Just to say, yes, we have performed slight less than what we wanted to perform there as our own internal construction unit of the department that we have there. And the causative factor there would be in view then 2 points. The first one that would be that we made a mistake as a construction unit there to actually move to site too quickly before the designs were completely and entirely completed. So that was one of the aspects that we internally reflected well upon, and we amended our approach by developing our own efficiency enhancement strategy with a construction unit to actually see that we can rid ourselves of all the inefficiencies that has actually became part of the fiber of the unit. So we are in a major turnaround process with regards to the unit in terms of such let's call it mistakes that have been made. However, there's also a second causative factor, which is also linked to the Honourable Chair's second question regarding the aspect of delays that actually also leads to delays in expenditure itself. And that would be linked to the procurement that we have found to be not favourable for the optimum functioning of such a construction unit. And that is the reason why we amended our internal infrastructure procurement strategy and policy within the department, where we are now also seeing that how we can get to a point of increasing the pace at which we actually progress as far as the procurement, infrastructure procurement is concerned, because the department would be perhaps the only department really in government that is procuring as much for its own implementation with its own construction unit. So that would be elements, Honourable Chair, that we've already commenced with the implementation of. And we are basically, this might be like an oil tanker being turned around. It's a slower process than we wanted to, but it's definitely amendments that can be seen or changes that can be seen. And more of this will be reported upon perhaps in terms of its progress as we progress into the year. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Kalani, there was a question about the number of members in the Regulated Commission.
Thank you, DG. Honourable members, the commission is made up of 11 members, which are appointed from across the provinces. It's got a chair and a deputy chairperson. Their term is from August 2022 for a 3-year period. They consist of a number of skills from finance, economic development, as well as engineering and scientists. So they provide advice to the minister on a number of functions as reported by the DG earlier. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Kalani. And then finally, Babawa, Honourable Moore pointed to some apparent errors in our report. Would you like to respond?
Yes, DG. I'll start with the one on slide 30. From a planning perspective, our annual performance plan is due at the beginning of March. So our first quarter report is therefore from April to June. So from the annual performance plan, we had planned that we should have, for example, 55 projects. However, by the end of the financial year, when we reported for the previous financial year, there were 2 projects that were completed. And so we could not necessarily adjust our annual performance plan to take those projects up. So that slide 30, that too indicates that even though we put an asterisk, and we have underachieved by 8, meaning that the 2 projects were completed in the previous financial year. So by the end of March, those projects were completed, and we have got completion certificates to that effect. So we cannot necessarily report them in the new financial year, even though they were planned for the new financial year, because of the timing issue. So that works across the board, DG.
It also raised an apparent error on page 24.
24 on the licensing one, yes, that is an error that we will just correct going forward. Thank you, DG.
Thanks for pointing that out to us, Honourable Moore. We will endeavour to make sure that our report in future is error-free. Thank you, Chair.
Chairperson.
Yeah.
No, thanks, Chair. Just as matters of emphasis is that as a ministry, we are looking forward to the support of the portfolio committee while we are concluding this parliamentary term. In one of the key issues is more legislatively, Chair. These bills that are coming to you now in fast and fury, you must be in a position to forgive us because if we don't act the manner we suggest that we act as a ministry, the sustainability of the sector is under threat. And the current fiscal regime does not have any space anymore to be able to meet all the demands we require, especially on infrastructure. Therefore, this bill that is being submitted to the Speaker of the National Water Resource Infrastructure Agency and the processes we've undertaken through Cabinet, through public consultation, including NETLEC, is an important bill. We know that certain people that are mischievous will assume that we want to privatize water. But there is no intention to do that. The ministry, we want to bring the possibility of investment in water using the assets that we have in terms of consolidation. And we hope that yourself as a portfolio committee, because we are our guiding light, you will find time and space, Chair, that you handle this matter, because in that other administration, this bill was brought in very late and it could not be concluded. And then the following administration, these matters were not attended to. That will be one request that we need to put it to you, Chair. The other one about the Water Services Amendment the DG has made reference to. There's been an expectation by yourselves as a representative of our people, but also citizens themselves, that this Ministry of Water must find it easy legislatively to intervene in local government. And you know that, Chair, for us to intervene, we've always been reliant on other interventions that are provided for in law. like your Section 139 of the Constitution that must be used. But we want to make it much easier for us to do a lot of intervention, like we're intervening in many other areas, so that when that intervention is being made, it remains legally, but also the resources that we have to expend them, those resources are not declared irregular expenditures that we need to do that. But it's going to also to be important, Chair, that as the leadership, you should note that the challenges of water services authorities to do both the function of being an authority and a provider, most of them, they've been struggling. They've been struggling, including those that have their own entities, whether it's the Joburg with Joburg Water, and somewhere in KwaZulu-Natal, they have their own Utugela Water and so forth. Some of these water entities are not competent enough or don't have the capability to be water services provider. That also goes beyond the provision of water, but also linking these things with their ability to solve infrastructure problems, but at the same time, attend to revenue measures. Those are some of the things that, Comrade Chair, I thought I should be able to raise. Other than that, we're on the ground, hardworking, and with your support, at least, we are happy that certain villages now in Guyana, like your Hume and others, the Chair, water is running out of the taps now. And I hope you'll find time to go and check. We, with the minister, we should be going there on the 6th, just to go there to check, push Lepele, push Mopani. This week, at the end of last week, I met with all stakeholders there with your influent intervention. I know it's closer to your heart, Comrade Chair. And Minister is there today. And then on the 31st, we'll be opening more than 150 megaliters of additional water capacity that is being brought in by rainwater. We are hard at work, and with a very good accountability mechanism and oversight by yourselves, we are making progress. On the issue of the independent regulator, I think Sean has responded well. Yeah, remember, it's the first issue when you started this parliamentary term that Salka was complaining that we are referring the player. On our side, we have ring-fenced. We've done the incubation now of an independent regulator as a first phase, like Sean is saying. We are actually having those commissioners. They've already started giving us variable input and advising managing these issues on how determinations have to be made around these other tariffs. But other than that, Chair, we always appreciate you to appear in front of yourselves. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have exhausted the participation on the item. The second item, Nosipo, it is the
adoption of the program, Chairperson.
Can you put
Can we excuse the Chairman?
Yeah. You remember you did say put your approach in advance. You can leave. It does not mean that your members must also leave. They can leave if they are committed, but they can remain if they want to. With you, I think your apology was long said.
No, thanks, Chair.
There is a program, colleagues, on the 29th, which is today. We are now through. Tuesday, the 5th, we are going to have a meeting. We are considering the petitions of residents of Northern Cape and north and northeastern part of Rustenburg. I must say there are also letters written to me by the Ratepayers Association about that, and I think it is. If they are available, you might even invite them to the meeting if they want to come, just to listen to their own petition. Is that the only 2 days, Nasib? Where are the other days? On the 11th of May to the 15th, we are study tour to China. The 19th of September, the department is briefing us on the boards. The 22nd of September, the Mopani District Municipality is giving us a report back on what Honorable Mahlobo has just spoken about. There is then the one on the, or is that the last one? The one of September 22?
Yes, Chairperson.
Okay. Members, there we are. I've blocked myself out. Okay. Can I see hands on the program? Honorable Peterson.
Agreed, Chair.
Honorable Zek is moving for the adoption. Honorable Peterson.
I agree with the proposal of Comrade Nteki, of Honorable Nteki.
Moved and seconded. Is there anyone who has got a different view? None. Thank you very much. Do we all don't we all have any minutes to be adopted? I forgot to ask you.
There is, Chairperson, in the next meeting.
Oh, okay. For today, the meeting has come to an end. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for your time and your cooperation on the meeting. The meeting is duly adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much.